Welcome to the Wizard of Radical Self-Respect, everyone. I wanted to hop on a live stream here. It's been a while since I've done one of these solo, besides going on an interview with somebody, but I wanted to hop back on and go over a narcissist origin story today. But I also want to make a channel announcement too, because what's been really getting me emotional recently is I've been looking at all of the double standards and the hypocrisy of our political world in America. And I want to start pointing some of that out because I do think that stuff is important. Dwight D. Eisenhower said that the responsibility of every U.S. citizen should be U.S. politics. Politics should be every U.S. citizen's part time profession. And I think we're seeing this right now more than ever that you can't really ignore it and you shouldn't. And I'm not a fan of Republicans or Democrats. I see double standards and hypocrisy everywhere. So I think a good use of my time would be kind of putting what I know about toxic behaviors, double standards, and narcissism and start applying it to current events, applying it to politics. Let me know what you think about that. But that's where my emotions are right now. And it might contribute that I've been working in political polling right now. So it's got politics is on my mind, but it's also what I'm passionate about. And talking about toxic behaviors and narcissism, I think it helps a lot of people. It's interesting, but there does also come a point where there's nothing else to talk about. You've talked about it all. You can continue to reiterate what you've gone over again and again and again, but eventually there's a limit. And I see, refer to Dr. Grande. Dr. Grande is someone who years ago, he used to speak exclusively about narcissism, borderline personality disorder, autism. But now look at his channel. Now he's talking all about current events and his thoughts on current events. I would like to do something similar to that. And the difference is I don't have the restraints that a licensed professional like Dr. Grande does. I can freeball it and really speak my mind because what's anyone going to do about it? Nothing is what they're going to do. And I've also been dying to let some of my debate bro out too, because I've kind of kept that in check for a long time now. But I have a feeling it's coming out again. And I might want to start debating and talking with other people about current events, even people in my own space here, self-help space, dating space, political space, current events. That's where my mind is with some of this stuff. I'm just letting you all know. But what is a narcissist origin story? Officially, a narcissist origin story is from one of two ways. One, their parents are over coddling. They put them on a pedestal. Maybe they treat them like a golden child and they praise them to kingdom come. They didn't really deserve it, but they put them on this pedestal and everything they do is gold. And what people don't realize is this is traumatic also for a child. The children in this case, they are often extensions from a narcissistic parent themselves, and they're not genuinely getting love and affection. They are being idolized. They are being treated like a thing. And this is traumatic for a child. And it's one of the examples of a childhood trauma that creates a narcissist. And I think people don't realize it, but that is one of the ways. If you spoil them rotten, give them everything they ever wanted, give in to their tantrums, that creates a narcissist. It does. Now, the other aspect of it is the severe neglect, abuse, mistreatment, etc. And that version of childhood trauma can also create a narcissist. And that's the official reason a narcissist comes about. And I was listening to a reel the other day about Dr. Ramani was saying that she puts it all on the parents, that the parents create the narcissist. And honestly, even though the books say it's just the parents, my personal opinion is I think there's also a genetic component in there too. I think there's something going on biologically that maybe makes them a little less likely to have empathy. But whatever it is, it's the combination of whatever trauma that child has, whether it's they're put on the pedestal and spoiled rotten, and treated like an idol or a thing or something to show off by their parents, or it's the opposite version, the neglect and abuse. But the genetic component plus one of those two things, or a combination of both, creates narcissism. I don't know why the genetic component doesn't really get talked about much in the narcissistic space. The professionals are very hesitant to talk about that side of it. But despite that, even Sam Vaknin, in his book, he says, yes, there's no examples of that being true, but he thinks more than likely there is also a genetic component. But why do I think that? I think that because a kid can be super spoiled or abused and neglected and have some version of childhood trauma, but not every kid that goes through that turns into a narcissist. Why? What possibly could be the reason? If someone has had the same experience or a very similar experience, one turns into a narcissist, one doesn't. What can possibly explain that? Personally, I think there's something genetic, something in the genes, something biological that got passed down, and it could even be separate among siblings. That does happen too. Not every sibling is a narcissist from narcissistic parents. Often there's the roles, the golden child, the black sheep, lost child, scapegoat, invisible child, whatever it is, there can be many different roles. But I also think, like I said, it doesn't mean just because you had childhood trauma, not everyone turns into a narcissist that had childhood trauma. And even if you did just say it was childhood trauma, that would mean to me also narcissism is an extension of CPTSD, just a different version. And I think either way, though, these labels and how we talk about it, I always try to stress this. It's not about the label as much as it is about the behaviors. And that goes for narcissists themselves and the people who have been mistreated by a narcissist. It doesn't matter what their label is. It matters what their behaviors are and how they treat you. And whether it's even a self-aware narcissist that wants to help themselves, they have to recognize their triggers. They have to recognize, okay, what's going on here in this situation? Heal NPD, Lee Hammock, he had a thread the other day on Threads. He was talking about 10 things he learned in therapy for his treatment of his narcissism. And for those who don't know, Lee Hammock is a self-aware narcissist. He has NPD. And it's a pretty interesting thread. And he realizes that, yeah, he's going to have to be in therapy for the rest of his life, but he accepts that. And it's actually a really interesting thread. If you haven't seen it, I recommend you check it out. And now that I'm talking about him, I should probably invite him on the channel here too. I think we could have a pretty interesting discussion because he knows narcissism inside and out, and except he's doing it from that angle. And like I've always talked about here too, I probably have some narcissistic traits. Probably not as bad as, say, someone diagnosed with NPD, but I'd certainly have some, I would think. And I think a lot of people who are creators probably do too. It's just a matter that they don't admit it. But I think it's interesting to learn about the origins. Again, does it matter for our recovery to know what the origin is? I think there's an element of, if you can understand, maybe they didn't choose it, especially if there's a genetic component, that maybe that can help us in our healing, that we can let go of resentment. Because even, let's say there is no genetic component, when a kid's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, it's like, do they make the choice consciously to say, you know what? I'm not going to have empathy. I'm going to go off into this never, never land of fantasy, and I'm going to cultivate my fantasies, and I'm going to want the A's, attention, admiration, and acknowledgement, and I'm going to be full of toxic shame, sensitive to criticism, and I'm going to be very hierarchical in my thinking and be seeking status. Is that what a 7 or 8 year old thinks? No, I don't think it's a conscious choice. I think it's just, that's just how it is. That's how they protect themselves from their trauma. And unfortunately, the way they protect themselves also ends up hurting a lot of people. And that's the unfortunate part. But I don't think they choose that. But again, does that really matter for us? I think it matters to the extent that how do we let go of resentment and accept the past? And I think that's one way to accept the past. But I think what also happens a lot is people really want to demonize them and say, yep, they chose it, every bit of it. It's all their fault. They are just the devil. And I think that's an understandable phase. The anger phase, when you finally recognize how you've been treated, all of the abuse, etc., a very understandable phase. But I also don't think it's necessarily a phase you want to stay in. I think it's something you want to move through, that you want to get through to the other side and look at things in a way that you're the happiest and healthiest version of yourself today. That's my opinion with it. I'm not trying to invalidate people by saying that, because I do think the anger phase is an important phase. And I'm not for anybody repressing any emotions at all. I'm all for them feeling it to heal it. Feel all of it. Don't repress any of it. And I think if we're stuck in that stage for too long, though, I don't think that's helpful either. But I also recognize if you try to force people through it and rush them, that probably will have the opposite effect. So I just mention it as something to be mindful of. But all in all, genetic component plus the childhood trauma component. And either way, though, our journey should be our journey regardless, right? We're going to have to do what we have to do. But that is how the narcissists are created. A version of childhood trauma, whether it's they've been put on the pedestal and treated like an object or a show thing, or neglected and abused, plus a genetic component. In my opinion, that is the narcissist origin story. Officially, it is just the childhood trauma. Officially, it is one of those two things. But I do think there is a genetic component, because how do you explain then the kids that also had childhood trauma and were put on the pedestal or neglected and didn't become a narcissist? How do you account for that? I don't think you can account for that. But that's how a narcissist is created. And I think I'll probably talk to Lee Hammock about this. I'm going to invite him on the show. And I think it'd be pretty cool if the people who have questions about him to drop them in the comment section below when this video is over here, and I can ask him those questions, because he'll be different than me interviewing HG Tudor. HG Tudor, also a self-aware narcissist and psychopath, but he's doing it from a slightly an entertaining angle, not necessarily an angle of him trying to get better. It's more like he's owning the villain role, and it works for him. Lee Hammock's not trying to own the villain role. He's trying to admit he has an issue, and he's genuinely trying to get better. But it is interesting to note that when someone owns the villain role, people like it. I think there's something just authentic and genuine, even if it's the villain role, that people can relate to and identify with. And it's not as repulsive as someone who tries to pretend to be somebody they're not. To me, that's something that bothers me the most. When someone tries to pretend to be someone they're not, or acts like they are better than they are, and they got that fake energy persona. I've been watching other YouTube content creators lately, and I see it all the time, this fake persona that I can see it from a mile away. And it might be because I'm on the spectrum a little bit and I can see through it. Maybe. And I might start talking about some of that stuff, because it really does bother me. It does bother me when I see these hypocrites and people talking with double standards and this fraudulent fake energy. I can't stand it. But what do I do about it? If there's something that really bothers me, what do? It means I got to place a boundary or take action. That's what it means. And I always tell everyone else, if you're bothered by someone else's behavior, it means you got to place a boundary or take action, or maybe remove yourself from the situation. And I have to take my own advice with this. And I think what I'm going to do is expose these double standards. I'm going to expose hypocrisy, whether it's other YouTube content creators or in the political world. But I think it's super important right now, because the truth and genuine people in the political sphere and the content creation sphere that talk about current events, they are so few and far between. One of my biggest inspirations for talking about like history and politics was Dan Carlin. He had a podcast called Common Sense. And sadly, he doesn't make it anymore, but I think it's sorely missed at this point. But what I really appreciated about him was he was genuine. And you might not always agree with him, but I knew he wasn't being a fraud. He was being authentic. And I think that's the biggest difference, because I listened to shows of his from all the way back in 2010, 11, 12, and before even. And he wasn't cringe. Like, he wasn't a hypocrite. He was someone that spoke his mind, and he wasn't going out of his way to try to get just views at all costs and to say whatever he has to say to keep those eyeballs coming in and to keep the money coming in. That's what I see a lot of today. I see people just not believing a word they say, having strong opinions about things they have no idea about. And that's super dangerous. When someone comes off and starts rattling off things on X or YouTube confidently, even though they have no idea what they're talking about, they can mislead a lot of people. And they are being hypocrites when they do that. They are being frauds when they do that. And I think somebody needs to call them out, because, and then this is where the toxic positivity folks might come in and say, oh, if you try to call out anybody else, you're just below them and hate only comes from below. It's like, well, not quite there, Jack, because sometimes bad stuff happens when people who are good do nothing. How about that? Sometimes you got to call people out. Sometimes they got to be held to account for what they're saying and what they're doing. And there's nothing wrong with that. But beware of the people who say there is something wrong with that. Sometimes the spiritual narcissist types, the communal narcissist types, they twist it. They'll twist the positive thinking into, well, you can't say anything to call me out, or you're being negative, or you're operating from ego, or you have some healing work to do. It's like, no, that is all flipping the script there, buddy. All flipping the script. The difference with a lot of those spiritual narcissists is they flip the script in a fancy way, in a slick and slippery way. And they do it with flowery words and whatever. But at the end of the day, they are still flipping the script. At the end of the day, they are still deflecting from their own actions, and they are not being held accountable. And I think more people need to do that for the people in our political space, our current events space, etc., because there are precious few. And the tricky part about this is almost no one believes the people they listen to are that. Everyone thinks, no, not the people I listen to. The people I listen to are the truth tellers. The people I listen to, they're the ones who get it right. It's like, are they really? Are they really the ones that get it right? Because in my opinion, almost all of them have double standards and are hypocrites. It just depends on the topic. And that's true of most. In my opinion, the people who are the most genuine, they're not going to be able to be a diehard Republican or a diehard Democrat. Because if you're thinking for yourself, you're probably going to be in the middle on some issues. And honestly, the people who I trust the most are the people who disagree a lot with both sides as well, because at least at that point, it means they're thinking for themselves and being genuine. That's my thought on that matter. But I think it's important, especially right now, especially after what happened on July 13th, the assassination attempt of President Trump. Like, we are coming on some dangerous times here. And like, when I walk around and I talk to people at the door, you saw I made that video the other day, the day it happened. People ask me sometimes, they don't know what I do on YouTube and Instagram and Facebook here and TikTok, but they'll say, yeah, Jared, when are you going to run? When are you going to run for office? And here's the thing about that. It is difficult because you have to play the game by the Republicans and the Democrats' rules at this point. Because the founding fathers warned of this. They said, do not let political parties get too big. Do not let them take control of the country, because that is not what we intended. And lo and behold, what do we have today? We have that exact scenario the founding fathers warned about. There's a reason that we haven't had a third-party political candidate since Ross Perot in the presidential debates in 1992. Why, you might ask? Because one of the very few things Republicans and Democrats agree upon is you have to poll at 15% in order to be a part of the presidential debates. RFK did not poll at 15%. Now, granted, it's an impossible number pretty much for a third-party candidate to get to, but that was their point. The Democrats made it impossible after that 1992 debate because Ross Perot talked about things that both the Republicans and the Democrats didn't want talked about. It embarrassed them. And after that, they said in their bipartisan committee, oh, what can we do to make sure this never happens again? Oh, of course. Raise the standard that you need to be a part of the debates to 15%. And what do you know? It hasn't happened since. So my whole idea is I would love to see more parties. I would love to see more nuanced viewpoints because I kind of think it's a shame. It's a shame that America can only show for itself Trump versus Biden. Of all the brilliant minds in America, like we are so far away from the Marcus Aureliuses of the world running our country. To me, it's a disgrace. But rather than just complain about it, it's like, well, Jared, what are you doing about it? And I think one of the quotes that always stands out to me too is, you can't expect the political leaders to rise too far above the level of the thought of the people. I apologize. I don't remember who said that, but I didn't come up with it. But I think we're seeing that too. And I think if I can pull what I'm doing here in this narcissistic abuse space to current events and politics, maybe that will do some good for the world. And of course, I'm still going to talk about toxic behaviors and narcissism and perhaps some dating and other current events too. And my shorts do really well on this channel, but my regular videos, the live videos and other longer form videos, they usually don't really blow up. And it's like, well, Jared, if what you're doing is not working in that area, you have to try something different. So, and people might get mad at me, Jared, why are you going to start adding that onto here? You might alienate some people. You might whatever. It's like, well, my Instagram's not going to turn into that. My TikTok's not going to turn into that. And my Facebook's not going to turn into that. This will just be a YouTube exclusive thing because this is where I can post longer form stuff about things. The other stuff, if that kind of thing with politics and toxic behaviors doesn't appeal to you, yeah, you can watch me on those other things. I'm not going to mix them there. But I'm also more successful there than I am on YouTube too. Like I have 10,000 subscribers now. I'm very grateful for all of the subscribers I have here, especially the ones that have been here for a while, because I've been here for years, which is a long time. And the growth has been slow, but I got to try to take it to the next level here with the lives and the videos that are longer. And I think in order to do that, I got to start doing some different things. I got to start throwing some stuff up against the wall and to try to get myself out there, because there's a lot of people talking about narcissism on YouTube. There's a lot of people talking about toxic behaviors. There's a lot of people talking about dating. But how many people are doing a little bit of both? Talking about toxic behaviors, narcissism, but then applying it to the political world, then applying it to the current events. I don't think any, and I think that's where I could fit in here. So that's what I'm thinking. That's what I'm going to try to do. And I know I'm just in a stream of consciousness right now. I know the title of the video is A Narcissist Origin Story, and I did go over that. But when I get live here, what's on my mind comes out. And it's cathartic for me to talk about the things that are on my mind too, because I think it's important to get that stuff off your chest. But that's kind of what I'm thinking here a little bit, because I am a little bit of a history buff and I do really enjoy current events and politics. Maybe it's time to combine them. But if you got this far, please remember to subscribe to the video, or excuse me, subscribe to the channel if you got this far. Like the video if you liked it. Hit the notification bell so you'll be notified when I come up with more videos. Let me know in the comments section below what you think about this mixing of current events and toxic behaviors / politics, or addressing the BS that I see out there. What do you think about that? What do you think about my theory on a narcissist origin? And to reiterate the theory, it's childhood trauma plus genetics or a biological component. The two elements of the childhood trauma are being put on a pedestal, treated like an object or a thing, an extension of one of the narcissistic parents, probably, or neglect, abuse, and being mistreated. Those are the two elements of the childhood trauma, plus a little genetic or biology. And the reason I say there's genetic or a biological component is because why wouldn't everyone who has childhood trauma turn into a narcissist if it wasn't for the genetic component? What's the difference? Why wouldn't that happen? I can't explain it. Maybe someone out there can explain it to me why they think it is, because I know officially, according to the DSM and many doctors, they're only going to tell you that they're created via childhood trauma. They're not going to mention the genetic component. But I do personally believe there is a genetic component. That's just me. Don't go off stating that as fact. That is just the Wizard of Radical Self-Respect's opinion. And I'll leave it at that. But hopefully you got something out of this video. You learned something. Either way, does it impact our healing journey? I think things that can help us let go of resentment and help us to accept the past. For example, thinking that the narcissist didn't choose to become a narcissist. They might consciously manipulate people, for sure. But did they choose initially when they were a child to become a narcissist? I don't think so. And I think that can help us on our journey today and say, you know what? They had some bad stuff go down. They might even embellish how bad it was. That does happen too. But either way, I don't think they chose it. And I think it can help us live a happier and healthier life today. But with that, thank you very much for watching. Have a great rest of your day.